exposed. At my son's wedding, my sister's shocking words led to an incredible transformation. Mark stood at the front of the church, hands clammy, heart racing. The flickering lights cast shimmering shadows over the delicate wildflowers adorning the pews, a stark contrast to the turmoil swelling within him. Jacob, his boy, stood on the cusp of adulthood, ready to step into a new life, and yet the past weighed heavily on Mark's shoulders. She was coming. Nikki, his sister who had wandered off to chase a glimmering city dream while leaving behind loyal roots, was back for this moment, a moment he felt should only belong to family. He clenched his fists tighter against the counter like a stubborn engine seizing up. She had the audacity to show her face after all these years of betrayal. Growing up, family meant loyalty and sacrifice. Somewhere along the way she had blurred those lines, choosing extravagance over love. Could this day be tainted by her presence? Mark's fears coiled around his heart like a creeping vine, suffocating any flicker of joy he had for Jacob as guests filled the pews. Laughter and chatter buzzed around him like static electricity. He fought to push down waves of resentment, questioning whether he could keep this day sacred for his son. He recalled tough nights spent in the garage, hands coated in grease, working endless hours to provide for Jacob. Each sacrifice etched in his bones, a story of struggle that clung to him fiercely. And there she was, an unwanted shadow, threatening to unravel everything he worked for. The heart-wrenching truth whispered through his mind. Would Jacob's future forever be overshadowed by an estranged aunt who cast off their legacy? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Mark forced himself to breathe deeper, to focus on Jacob, who beamed with anticipation. People around him were oblivious to the turmoil wreaking havoc in his mind. But how long could he hide it? The moment felt consequential, a tightrope walk between happiness and pain. He glanced at the double doors as they swung open. There she was. Nikki stepped in, eyes bright yet shadowed by something deeper. Whispers flitted through the crowd like startled birds, all eyes drawn to her. Mark's stomach twisted violently at the sight. As the ceremony progressed, Mark wrestled with a swirling mass of anger and pain, memories of childhood and joyous laughter mixing with resentment. When the pastor invited Nikki to speak, a shiver of disbelief ran through him. She stood at the edge of vulnerability, recounting how she'd followed Jacob from afar, celebrating each milestone while burying her regrets. Every word was a hammer against Mark's carefully constructed worldview. Could she really understand the weight of loyalty? His mind screamed in agony as raw emotions surfaced at her unexpected praises of him. She admired his hard work and dedication, but with it came the unbidden question. Was she ever really lost? Or was she just different? Mark's heart clenched tighter, fraying threads of forgiveness weaving themselves in the air, pulling him closer to the edge of what might be possible. The tension roared in his ears as their eyes locked, speaking volumes of the silence that had marred years of family love. He was poised on the brink, yearning for a chance to reconcile yet paralyzed by the memories of betrayal. Seasoned scars throbbed, reminding him of the battles fought in unrelenting solitude. Would he allow himself, for Jacob's sake, to step into that uncertain light of family love? The question lingered, heavy as the stillness in the church. Mark stood teetering, lost in the confusion of his own heart. As Nikki's eyes shone with hope, the air crackled, and the next moment could rewrite everything. Mark's mind raced as the moment hung suspended. The air felt electric, fraught with untapped potential. He could see Jacob's future shimmering ahead, a delicate tapestry woven from love, commitment, and the stark realities of life. Yet, Nikki's presence threatened to unravel the threads. How could he reconcile wanting to embrace her with an instinctual need to protect their family's history? With the congregation's gaze fixed intently on Nikki, Mark experienced an oddly detached sensation. As if standing outside himself, he could see the nervous quiver in her voice, the attempts to conceal the cracks in her polished persona. Her words dripped with sincerity, each syllable a subtle confrontation to his hardened beliefs about family, loyalty, and particularly about her choices. Were those choices truly her mistakes, or merely a different approach to life altogether? His instincts told him to reject her offer of connection, to wall up the decades of hurt she caused and stubbornly hold on to his anger. It felt empowering to harbor that resentment, a badge of honor for the struggles he had faced alone. But the bitterness also sat like a weight on his chest, constraining him. In the midst of his internal turmoil, he caught Jacob's radiant smile, illuminating the dark corners of Mark's heart. The truth weighed heavier than ever. What kind of example would he set for his son if he allowed himself to be consumed by past grievances? Suddenly, Mark felt a thread of resolve weaving through his confusion. If he wanted to guarantee Jacob's future, he couldn't continue shackling his own heart to bitterness. Perhaps by engaging with Nikki, he could uncover a path not just for himself but forge a new, expansive understanding of family for Jacob. He couldn't protect his son from the failures of the past if he himself clung to them in the present. Mark inhaled sharply, forcing himself to dive deep into memories that were both painful and rich with lessons. Each sacrifice for Jacob had been more than just survival, it was an investment in possibility. Could he allow that same investment to flourish by granting Nikki a second chance? Thoughts raced. They were not so dissimilar after all. Both had chased dreams, both had faltered. Just as he began to contemplate how he might approach her after the ceremony, the pastor's voice riding the wave of emotion pulled him back. "Let us pray for unity," he intoned solemnly. A warmth crept into Mark's chest, a flicker of hope piercing through the shadows. It resonated with an urgency he had long buried. He wanted unity, not just for Jacob's sake but also for his own peace. When Nikki turned her gaze to him, vulnerability etched across her features, Mark's heart responded in kind. It was time to redefine what family meant. He needed to confront the labyrinth of his emotions head-on, accepting the possibility that forgiveness might lie just beyond his carefully constructed walls. As the ceremony concluded, Mark felt a sense of clarity rising within him. He approached Jacob, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. "I'm proud of you, buddy," he said softly, a determined smile breaking through his earlier frown. Yet, even as he spoke, he could feel the pull towards Nikki, an uncharted territory waiting to be explored. The moment had arrived. He would face Matt's anguish and confront his sister. Would he find the courage to navigate the treacherous waters of reconciliation? Perhaps if he dug deeper into their shared history, he could align past pains with newfound understanding. As he took a step towards Nikki, his heartbeat echoed in his ears, a chorus of yearning and fear. But a lingering question remained at the forefront of his mind. What would forgiveness truly cost him, and could he bear the weight of it? Mark felt the moments leading up to his conversation with Nikki becoming a tightrope walk, each step a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Leaving Jacob's side, he focused inward, recalling the confusion that had sown discord between him and Nikki for years. The tantalizing prospect of reconciliation flickered in his mind, but was buried beneath layers of hurt. Could he truly trust not just her intentions but also his own capacity to forgive? As he approached her, the swell of emotion coloring the atmosphere intensified, suffusing him with a sense of purpose. Nikki had always possessed the uncanny ability to unearth his vulnerabilities. Yet, amid those uncertainties, a burgeoning sense of strength started to slice through his trepidation. He could no longer wear the mantle of resentment. It was heavy, suffocating, and unyielding. Tomorrow's possibilities bravely called to him, and Mark fought not to strangle that hope. "Nikki," he ventured, his voice low but unmistakable. The air thickened with unspoken fears as she turned, the vulnerability in her gaze striking a chord within him. Her eyes glimmered with a mix of expectation and dread. "Mark, I know," he interrupted, surprising himself with the forcefulness of his words. "You want to explain, to talk about the past." He took a breath, wrestling with the cadence of his own heart. "But I need to be honest first. Seeing you again, it unearthed so much." Nikki's mouth opened as if to speak, but he pressed on. He had to set the tone, cement this as a moment of truth, not just negotiation. "It unearths the anger, the disappointment." Each word felt like an anchor in a swirling sea of memories. "But it also brings a glimmer of something else. Something I wasn't ready to acknowledge until now." "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. It was both a question and a lifeline. I've been holding on to waterlogged memories, he admitted, feeling the weight of his confession slip into the space between them. Every time I thought of you, I felt a surge of anger, justified, of course, but it consumed me. I realized I've let that anger define my view of you, of us. Nikki flinched at his honesty, a shadow of hurt washing over her. Mark, no, let me finish. I want to understand you better. I want to find a way to forgive, not just for you but for Jacob. I want his values and vision for the future to be rooted in love and acceptance, not in anger and division. His heart pounded, pouring out in pure conviction. Nikki blinked, visibly taken aback by his rawness. Forgiveness ain't easy, nor is it a linear path, she whispered, half in awe of his revelation, half apprehensive. I know it'll be hard, Mark replied earnestly. But isn't family worth trying? Isn't our son worth it? Silence descended for a brief, heavy moment, and it felt as if they had scribbled the beginning of a new narrative on the air between them. An uncharted territory lay before him, filled with uncertainty but also immense potential. Could they truly rewrite their story in a way that benefited Jacob? I'm willing to engage in that process, Nikki finally said, almost hesitantly. But can we also acknowledge the impact of what has happened? There are other people involved, other emotions. Mark nodded, the path widening as his vision sharpened. Yes, we can. Change requires more than mere forgiveness. It demands understanding the acceptance of past mistakes as building blocks, not barriers. Both hesitated, wrestling with shared trepidation. Mark felt like a tightrope walker amid a gusting wind, balancing an exhilarating promise against the precipice of withdrawal. As they stood on the cusp of a reconciliation, Mark contemplated whether he was ready to confront his own deepest fears of vulnerability. What if he ventured into the messy terrain of unresolved feelings and discovered things about himself that he had carefully kept tucked away? With Nikki's hand extended, a new chapter beckoned, fraught with the potential for conflict and healing alike. Mark took a breath, feeling the walls begin to crack. But what if we failed to truly change? He questioned, voice low, anxiety gripping at his core. What if this all collapses again? Just as the weight of those questions began to swirl like a storm, Mark understood their true significance. He was no longer merely stepping into the space around Nikki. He was stepping into his own transformation, a mantle of courage settling upon his shoulders. Then we return to each other again and again, until we find our balance, Nikki replied, offering a hint of hope amidst their fears. And as they stood united by uncertainty, Mark recognized the real challenge lay ahead. Would he summon the courage to navigate this complex landscape, or risk losing the chance to forge a truly profound connection? Mark's gaze flickered away from Nikki, drawn to the chaotic world beyond their charged moment. The shadows crept around them, mirroring the turmoil within. He could hear the muffled laughter and clinking of glasses from the nearby guests, a harsh reminder that life continued, oblivious to their personal turmoil. He took a step back, grappling with the simultaneous urge to flee and to stay. Just as he resisted the compelling notion of retreating into familiar bitterness, something within him insisted on the necessity of pushing forward, toward the discomfort. Clarity began to emerge amidst the chaos, reinforcing the notion that confrontation, whether with the past or with one's own insecurities, was integral to evolution. What does finding our balance actually look like? He asked, trying to navigate the daunting intricacies of their conversation. The words felt like tectonic plates shifting, each syllable laden with a depth that had previously eluded him. Nikki appeared to contemplate his question, her brow furrowing slightly, the vulnerability in her expression palpable. It means discussing everything, she eventually stated, searching his eyes for understanding. All the hurt, the confusion that still lingers. It means tearing down the walls we've built around ourselves and risking being exposed. The idea rippled through Mark, igniting fears he'd kept buried for years. And what if those walls were built for a reason? He countered, his voice barely above a whisper. The weight of the past pushed against his chest like a dense fog, threading uncertainty through his veins. Maybe that's true, she conceded. But they've kept us apart, Mark. I don't want to live in a fortress anymore. As he absorbed her words, Mark felt a surge of recognition that same fortification he had constructed around himself was just as solid a barrier against his aspirations for change. What if her honesty sparked a similar awakening within him? This could be a potent metamorphosis or a perilous journey, and he was standing at the crossroads of both. His mind raced with possibilities. What aspects of himself had he neglected? What ambitions buried beneath resentment lingered in the dark corners of his psyche? He recalled moments of creativity he had stifled, projects he had abandoned, and paths unexplored, each potential part of himself crowded out by residual anger. This conversation was just the edge of his awakening, an invitation to live more courageously, and yet the potential for failure loomed terrifyingly large. What if opening up reveals parts of me that I hate? He blurted, unleashing a torrent of suppressed fears into the open. What if, in being honest, I only deepen our wounds? Nikki's eyes softened, showing neither pity nor condemnation. That's the risk we take, she affirmed. But wouldn't it be worse to live in a shadow of yourself forever? Besides, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just real. Her determination resonated with him, wrapping around his reluctance like a lifeline. As Mark observed the flicker of hope igniting in Nikki's expression, clarity became increasingly compelling. He realized that transformation often sprouted from within the turbulence of discomfort, where liberation and vulnerability could combust into unforeseen strength. But could he embrace that journey? Embrace her? The tension constructing between them thickened, each second stretching into eternity. He knew there was no turning back now. They teetered on the brink of something monumental. A widening path unfurled before him, dark yet inviting. I want to try. I want to be real, he finally admitted, feeling a pulse of vulnerability tugging at his heart. Before Nikki could respond, a sudden voice erupted, piercing the tentative atmosphere as Jacob dashed toward them, his joyous energy infectious. Dad! Mom! Can you come help me with something? In that instant, Mark's purpose crystallized. It wasn't just reconciliation that he craved. It was a reconnection with the essence of fatherhood, his duty to nurture Jacob's values, while dismantling the negative patterns that had engulfed him. Of course, he replied, his voice filled with newfound resolve, as he and Nikki followed Jacob through the throng of mingling guests, hearts still tethered by the profound conversation they had begun. The commitment to face their fears felt like a gentle promise nestled in the air between them. With each step Mark took alongside Jacob, he sensed the thin veil of apprehension retreating, replaced by the excitement of evolving toward better versions of themselves. Yet shadows of uncertainty still lingered, whispering daunting possibilities of failure as they moved deeper into the gathering. Just as laughter broke the surface laughter of the crowd, a solitary thought emerged, weighing heavily in the back of his mind. Would he find the strength to break the cycle, or would he simply reenact the patterns he'd grown so weary of battling? The challenge loomed ahead, and the journey toward transformation had officially begun. But the path was fraught with potential setbacks waiting to be unveiled. Taking a steadying breath, Mark braced himself for the monumental truths still waiting in the wings, eager to take center stage in their lives. As they wedged their way through the gathering, Mark's heart raced with a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. Jacob's playful energy was contagious, yet his own thoughts tangled relentlessly around the conversation he had started with Nikki. How was he supposed to balance the joy of being a father with the heavy introspection that loomed over him? With every laugh and cheer from the guests, Mark felt an undercurrent of fear tugging at the edge of his consciousness. What if he couldn't break free from his past? What if this light-hearted atmosphere became a backdrop to his unresolved fears? It was as if the laughter mocked him, reminding him of who he was versus who he aspired to be. A familiar warmth embraced him as they reached a corner where Jacob had gathered a group of his friends. The boy's laughter rang out like a beacon, momentarily drowning out Mark's swirling thoughts. He knelt to meet Jacob's eye level, grounding himself in the moment. What do you need, buddy? Jacob grinned broadly. Can you help me show them my new skateboard tricks? Mark's heart swelled with pride. Here was a chance to connect, to forge bonds that transcended the brittle walls he had built for years. Yet the shadow of discomfort lingered in his mind. He wrestled with a sudden impulse to retreat, rather than be vulnerable in front of Jacob's friends. Mark glanced at Nikki, whose encouraging nod reignited his resolve. If he could face the crowd now, perhaps he could face more profound challenges later. Standing upright again, he felt a peculiar thrill as he joined Jacob in demonstrating skateboarding tricks. The weight in his chest lightened. The laughter from the kids mingled with the applause of adults, reinforcing a sense of belonging. With each attempt at a new trick, confidence flooded his veins. Yet amid the joy, nagging doubts still invaded his thoughts. Would this newfound authenticity last? Was this mere evasion of the deeper conversations waiting in the wings? As Jacob successfully landed a trick, his friends erupted in cheers that echoed Mark's own hidden victories. For a brief moment, everything felt harmonious: the laughter, the energy, the exhilaration. But as the applause subsided, Mark felt a pull. Deep within, he knew that their playful escapade could not shield him from the conversations about his insecurities. It was merely a placation, a diversion from the impending confrontation with his past. Each cheer felt like a reminder. He was not merely a spectator but a participant in the narrative of parental growth. "Thanks, Dad," Jacob exclaimed, his face beaming with delight. Mark stared into his son's proud eyes, heavy halos of responsibility dawning on him. They were a mirror reflecting everything he was striving to transform. In that moment, clarity pierced through the haze. Returning to Nikki, Mark re-engaged their earlier conversation. "We need to talk, don't we?" he asked, his voice resolute but vulnerable. Her eyes widened slightly, a mixture of hope and fear washing over her face. It was the moment she had anticipated. More than ever, she replied softly, the sincerity in her tone knitting their shared resolve tighter. A murmur raced through the crowd as Mark and Nikki settled on a nearby bench, the laughter around them fading into the background. The stakes rose with every second as the weight of their conversation hung in the air. Mark took a deep breath, ready to unveil the parts of himself he had long kept hidden. Yet he felt the tremors of apprehension. What might he discover about himself in this moment? Would he find the words to express the fragments of his heart that were still tangled in bitterness or fear? Mark's heart raced with a swirl of anticipation and dread as he committed to this essential leap into vulnerability. As he opened his mouth to speak, yelling from a nearby group suddenly pierced the atmosphere. "Way to go, Jacob!" someone shouted, drawing the attention of everyone at the gathering. Mark's pulse quickened, a mix of annoyance and distraction flaring as they lost their privacy. Would he seize this moment to delve into the truth, or would he retreat once again, allowing the echoes of the outside world to drown out the questions he desperately sought to confront? Mark's next words, as they formed within him, would determine the path forward. The weight of change loomed once again. Yet within that weight was also the promise of release. Mark stared into Nikki's expectant eyes, the world around them fading as he navigated the turbulence swirling within. How could he articulate the crushing weight of his fears, the hands that had held him back? The laughter in the background, once a source of comfort, morphed into a cacophony of distractions he couldn't afford. "Here we go," he whispered to himself, feeling the pulse of hesitation transform into urgency. "I think we need to talk about who I've been. I've tried so hard to be better. For us, for Jacob. But I can feel the shadows haunting me still." Nikki leaned forward, her expression softening, inviting him to continue. "I'm listening," she encouraged, her voice weaving through the chaos. "We've danced around my past long enough. I need you to understand I'm terrified of repeating mistakes, of being the father who fails. I've thought, what if I can't you one tea?" she interjected softly, but Mark shook his head, anxiety gripping his throat like vice. "I'm trying to believe that, but doubt clings to me," he confessed. "I grew up in a chaotic home. My dad was—" Mark paused, searching for the right words. "He was emotionally absent, and I always thought it was about being strong, being silent. Now I fear I'll pass that down to Jacob." Nikki's eyes glimmered with understanding. "You're not your father, Mark. You've already broken that cycle just by recognizing it. But how do I keep breaking it?" He leaned into her sincerity, letting desperation fracture the stoic armor he often wore. "Sometimes I feel like those past patterns are like echoes, and I'm afraid I'll give in, afraid I'll let my son down." In the distance, Jacob darted towards them, cheeks flushed with excitement, oblivious to the gravity of the moment. "Hey Dad! Did you see me?" Mark's heart sank, a pull between his son's joy and the heaviness still clinging to him. "I did, buddy. You were amazing." The shared laughter between father and son felt both genuine and like a fragile tether, one he didn't quite trust would hold under pressure. Suddenly, another shout erupted from the gathering, breaking through the tension. "Mark, come join us for the next round." He glanced at Nikki, unsure whether to recede into the comfort of the crowd or plunge deeper into this conversation. The easy path tempted him, Seeking refuge among laughter felt safer than exposing his vulnerabilities. Yet he was painfully aware that every day that passed with avoidance chipped away at him, making the next confrontation that much harder. "Maybe you should go," Nikki said gently, though her tone hinted she understood he might choose otherwise. "No," he said firmly. "This is too important." The conviction in his voice surprised even him. "I want to face this. I need to, not just for me but for Jacob too. He deserves a father who can be there fully, not one who is distracted by his past." Determination sparked within him like a lit match catching dry paper. This was more than just a moment of connection. This was the foundation of the man he wanted to be. Mark drew in a steadying breath, fortifying his commitment to change in front of Nikki, in front of Jacob. "I'm ready to face it, my past, my fears. It's time to confront what I've avoided for too long," he declared, finding an unfamiliar strength in the depths of his uncertainty. Would this commitment be enough to shift his reality, to alter how he moved forward with Jacob? Nikki's lips curved into a proud smile, knitting their resolve tighter. "Then let us start here. Just one conversation at a time." As the laughter continued to cycle around them, a promise formed in Mark's heart, one that pulsed with newfound hope. He wouldn't allow the echoes to silence him any longer. Yet, just when clarity began to settle, a call rang out from Jacob. "Dad. Come see what I can do." The innocence in his son's voice pulled Mark back to the present, and the spark of joy mingled with his nervous anticipation as he rose to his feet. What awaited him on the other side of this confrontation? Would moments like this, filled with laughter yet fraught with personal challenges, transform him into the father he wanted to be? Or would the shadows of his past hold him captive once more? Mark felt the weight of expectation settle over him once more, but this time, he refused to retreat. Instead, he stepped forward into the light of Jacob's laughter, trepidation in tow. The stage of fatherhood awaited him in all its chaotic splendor, ready for him to forge a new identity amidst uncertainties. But as the laughter faded momentarily, a distant voice whispered within him, igniting a new fear. The hardest confrontation had yet to come, and it lurked closer than he realized. As Mark stood up, the rush of Jacob's laughter enveloped him like a warm embrace. Each step he took toward his son felt labored yet electrifying, a delicate dance between the person he was striving to be and the shadows still trailing him. He forced himself to focus, pushing aside the turbulent fear that threatened to engulf him. Jacob was showing off his soccer skills on the makeshift field, his small feet deftly maneuvering around an invisible opponent. Mark watched him, enraptured by the sheer joy radiating from his son's face. It was a face untouched by the cynicism that plagued Mark's thoughts. Yet that innocent gleam presented a mirror, reflecting not just Jacob's delight, but the weight of Mark's responsibilities. Would his son one day wrestle with the same fears of inadequacy that haunted him? "Look, Dad. Watch this," Jacob shouted, kicking the ball with all the strength his little legs could muster. It soared, missing the improvised goal by inches. Still, the delighted squeal that escaped Jacob's lips was infectious. Mark couldn't help but join in the celebration, beaming as if he'd just witnessed a miracle. His laughter rang out, but underneath it lay the darker whispers of self-doubt. Was this joy sustainable? Could he hold on to it? Or would it slip through his fingers like childhood itself? "Hey, he said slowly as he approached Jacob, "it takes practice to make those goals. Remember that next time, you just have to keep trying." He knelt to meet his son's gaze, realizing that this advice was as much for Jacob as it was for himself. As they played, Mark felt the tension begin to dissipate. Jacob's boundless enthusiasm made the shadows flicker, and he found himself pondering how he would process moments like today. Each laughter shared was a stitch in the fabric of a new legacy, one he could weave with intention and honesty. Yet, lurking beneath that euphoria was a nagging doubt: how would he address his shortcomings with Jacob, as he now knew he must? Therapy had introduced him to terms like vulnerability and responsibility, but words on their own felt flimsy without action to back them up. A deeper commitment was required, not only to improve himself but to engage actively in Jacob's life. Mark caught sight of Nikki again, her expression a blend of admiration and encouragement. But lurking in those soft eyes was also a question that echoed in his mind. Who would he be when faced with his own failures? Would he remember to extend grace to himself as he sought to be the father Jacob needed? After a few rounds of joyful play, the casual atmosphere shifted when a family friend approached, eyes signaling sibling solidarity. It was Mark's sister, Claire, holding a glass of lemonade, her demeanor arching into something serious. "Mark," she began almost hesitantly, "we need to talk. Mom wants to discuss, well, a few things about Dad." Instantly, the joy surrounding him hardened into a clenching panic. His heart drummed in his ears. He could sense the echoes of past family gatherings when revelations had sunk like stones into water, forcing everyone to confront the tides of unspoken feelings. But now he wasn't that boy who hid from emotional confrontation. He was a father determined to shatter cycles, someone ready to peel back layers. "Okay," he replied, trying to steady his voice. "Let us talk." As the two moved aside, Mark felt an unsettling mix of fear and resolve. Was he prepared for this? Would he again confront shadows from his father's legacy in this charge? This new avenue of dialogue wasn't just important. It was the onset of a necessity. The moment crystallized as an epiphany in his mind. Conversation could carve paths to healing. But would he be able to stay in the light, to embrace whatever was unveiled? As they found a quieter spot away from joyful chaos, Mark felt the mounting pressure of fear and curiosity blending into one. The confrontation was imminent, and through that narrow passage, he sensed the separate identities he had crafted: father, son, and ultimately, a man wrestling with shadows. What hidden truths would emerge from this familial dialogue? And how would they confront his journey toward being the father he so desperately wanted to be? Mark's heart raced as he followed Claire to a shaded corner of the backyard, the noise of laughter and soccer kicks fading into a murmur behind him. The air around them felt heavier, as if it held unsaid words just waiting to be released. Claire's face, usually so illuminated with warmth, was now taut, almost pinched with anxiety. "Mark, you know how things have been with Dad," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mama's been worried. She wants to talk about his health. His behavior. It's getting worse." The words hit Mark like a sudden chill, a jolt that pierced through the warmth he had felt moments ago. His instincts flared, his defenses rising quickly. He was accustomed to standing behind a wall of indifference, avoiding familial discussions that could spiral downward into chaos and pain. Yet, something inside him stirred, a flicker of determination igniting at the thought of addressing his father's issues instead of ignoring them. "Worse how?" Mark pressed, tension creeping into his tone, his mind racing. He had been skirting around this topic for years, hoping the family dynamic would change on its own, hoping to keep Jacob shielded from the ramifications of his father's legacy. "He's becoming forgetful, withdrawn," Claire said, her brow furrowed. "And yesterday, I saw him yelling at Mom. I haven't seen him like that in years." The mention of shouting twisted something within Mark. It reminded him too sharply of his childhood, distant memories of raised voices, accusations flying like arrows, and the feeling of smallness in a vast world of adult chaos. Those shadows lingered upon him still. Now, however, he had a son to consider. Jacob was too young to bear this inheritance. "Did you tell Mom this?" Mark asked, his voice steadier now, grounding himself in the moment. This was not just a family crisis. It was a call to action. "I have. But she's scared," Claire replied, her voice wavering. "She doesn't want to confront him. None of us do. I just thought, maybe if you were the one to talk to him." The request hung in the air, laden with an urgency that made his palms sweat. Could he step into the role of the mediator? Could he confront the man whose benchmark of fatherhood had left such a deep mark on him? The answer hovered between fear and commitment, and Mark felt it igniting a flicker of hope. If he could confront his father, maybe he could reshape the narrative, not just for himself but also for Jacob. "Claire, I'll do it," he stated, each word heavy with newfound resolve. He could feel the weight of history shifting, the cycle threatening to snap, something reborn between him and his sister. "I need to. For Jacob. For us." Claire blinked, surprise coloring her features, but then relief washed over her expression. "I believe you can do this, Mark. You've changed so much. Just promise me you'll be careful." "I will," he replied, the promise burrowing deep inside his chest. His son's laughter came drifting back to him, tethering Mark to the reasons for this confrontation. Anxiety still curled around his thoughts, but so did an unwavering determination. This was an opportunity to rewrite the past, to chase away the ghosts that had loomed over their family for far too long. "Let us go back," Claire said, breaking his reverie. As they turned, Mark cast one last glance toward the joyous chaos of Jacob and the other children, their innocent joy juxtaposed sharply against the complexities awaiting him, but deep within him, he felt the first stirrings of clarity. This was not merely about confronting his father. It held the promise of transformation, a chance to redefine legacy through sincerity and connection. As he stepped back into the chaos, ready to confront not only his father but also his own fears, Mark knew the path ahead would not be easy. Yet, each step toward the conversation that awaited felt invigorating, beckoning him to emerge from the darkness. What would he uncover in that confrontation, and how would it shape the father he wanted to become? The weight of unresolved feelings loomed large, but now there was also a glimmer of hope amidst the shadows. Mark returned to the frenetic energy of the backyard, where children squealed and laughter rang out in a chaotic symphony, a stark contrast to the gravity of his thoughts. Each giggle from Jacob pierced through Mark's anxiety, reminding him why he felt compelled to act. But the relief that came from his renewed determination was tinged with simmering dread. That as he crossed the lawn, the familiar sight of his father sitting under the gazebo caught his attention. Henry looked frail today, lost among his own thoughts, tracing absent patterns in the air with his gaze. Mark's heart sank at the sight, a fleeting reminder that this wasn't just a conversation. It was a reckoning. The man who was both a father and a ghost in Mark's life stood before him, and within Mark brewed an overwhelming mix of hope and fear. Could he find the courage to confront the flawed figure who had cast a long shadow over his past? Moments later, he positioned himself near his father, clearing his throat as he gazed out at the children playing, avoiding eye contact for fear of what might flicker across his father's face. "Dad," he started, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. The magic of childhood sounds faded into an eerie silence, as if the universe paused, aware of this critical juncture. Henry's head turned, his expression blank. Mark's breath caught. This was the moment he had rehearsed countless times in his mind, yet the reality felt more daunting than he had anticipated. "Can we talk?" His father's brow knitted. About what? The edge of impatience colored his words, and Mark fought the urge to retreat. This was it, a critical choice: either withdraw or press through the discomfort. "About you." "About us," Mark replied, each word deliberate. "Things aren't okay. Claire is worried." "Mom is worried." "The hell are you talking about?" Henry snapped, the gruffness stirring memories of past confrontations, echoes of childhood wooden faces and lamenting harshness. Mark felt his stomach tighten, but clarity emerged amidst the tension. "I'm not trying to attack you, Dad. I care about you. I'm coming to you as a son who is trying to understand." This approach caught his father off guard. For a brief moment, surprise washed over Henry's features. Mark seized that fleeting opportunity. "There've been changes your behavior," the shouting. "It's not just concerning. It's painful, especially for Mom and Claire. It's affecting Jacob too." At the mention of his grandson, something flickered in Henry's expression, a fracture of vulnerability that offered a glimpse of the man Mark hardly recognized anymore. "I don't need anyone telling me how to lead my life. I'm fine," he muttered, defensiveness creeping back in. Mark pressed onward, undeterred. "You may feel fine, but your actions tell a different story. I can't ignore this anymore. Please let us talk about what's really going on." That was the moment he had yearned for his father without pretense, an invitation to delve beneath the armor. And just like that, something larger than this moment surged between them. Mark began to realize that as daunting as the conversation with his father was, it was equally vital for his own evolution, the steps he took not merely to confront a legacy but to redefine it. The exchange embodied everything Mark had wrestled with: the truth of his father's decline, spirits cloaked in denial, lives reframed by avoidance. "Fine," Henry sighed, a reluctant acceptance shrouded in exhaustion. "But only if you can handle the truth." In that moment, Mark felt time shift not just between them but within himself. He was done masking fears and doubts, and the road to discovering not just what he might lose in this conversation but what he might gain was becoming clearer. As they moved to take a seat together in the gazebo, a tense silence enveloped them, blending the sweet scent of fresh grass with the pungent aroma of unspoken words. Mark's pulse quickened. This would not be a gentle conversation. It was a beginning full of potential and unveiling that could lead him closer not just to his father but to understanding who he himself was meant to become. What truths would surface in the fragile confines of this conversation, and how would they redefine both their lives? Mark braced for what lay ahead, but it was only the beginning. Mark sat in the backyard, his gaze locked on Jacob, who was laughing and teasing his friends, unburdened by the weight of the world that had once hovered so heavily over Mark. In the chaos of joy surrounding him, however, a profound epiphany began to form within. The conversation with Nikki had shifted something inside him, a flicker of courage ignited by the desire not to pass on his fears onto Jacob. Now, seated across from Henry in the gazebo, he retained that newfound resolve. The past was no longer a shackle but a wellspring of experiences that had shaped him, crafting the man he aspired to be for his son. "Let us address the elephant in the room," Mark began, his tight grip on the edge of the bench grounding him as he made eye contact with his father. "You've changed profoundly, Dad, and it impacts all of us." The weight of honesty sustained him. Words that once felt weighted by fear now sprang forth, ready to challenge the familiar dynamics. "What are you getting at?" Henry replied with a hint of aggression hidden behind apprehension. Mark sensed the familiar defensive stance but fought to remain unwavering. "Your temper, the way you've been detached. It's not just your life. It affects Mom and the rest of us." Jacob's grown up scared of family turmoil. Mark realized the implications weighed heavier than he intended, but he pressed onward. He deserves to know a different narrative, a legacy of love over fear. To his surprise, Henry's face softened. There was a flicker, tiny and wavering, that momentarily shifted the atmosphere. "Maybe you don't get it, Mark. This is how I've always been," he replied, vulnerability cloaked beneath bravado. "I've seen who you can be," Mark asserted, forcing deep breaths to remain calm. "It's time to confront the truth of that legacy. If we ignore it, it'll swallow us whole." Henry sighed, the lines on his face deepening, revealing the toll years of unresolved conflict had taken. "You think that's easy? You think I don't know the chaos I've caused?" "What chaos?" Mark challenged. "This isn't about blame, it's about understanding. We've both been shaped by it. Didn't we just go through this? I can't pass on those ghosts to Jacob. I refuse to watch the cycle repeat." "Cycles aren't so easy to break," Henry muttered as guilt began to seep through. Mark raised his voice slightly, a newfound authority resonating through him. "They aren't easy, but they are breakable. The first step is recognizing the fog of our choices. So let us clear it together." Henry paused, eyes clouding as realization swept over him. "I never knew you felt plagued by my behavior." Mark interrupted, feeling a swell of hope. "You're not shackled to the past either, Dad. You've done things you regret, but they can be a foundation for change instead of an anchor." As silence washed over them, Mark felt a shift in understanding beginning to blossom, not just between them but within himself as well. This confrontation, previously laced with fear, offered a dawning realization. They shared scars from the same source but also potential for healing. Together, they dismantled layers of resentment, bravely exposing the truth, a poignant conversation marked by vulnerability. With each exchange, Mark could feel the internal barriers fade, replaced with a reconciliatory bond slowly knitting itself anew. Finally, Henry broke the silence, his voice wavering. "I can't promise to change overnight. I've built walls for so long." Mark nodded, affirming the echoed sentiment. "Nobody expects perfection, Dad. Just willingness. That's all I need to see." Tears welled in Henry's eyes, a rare honesty breaking the facade he had worn for years. "I was scared you would turn out just like me, and now I see I'm the one who has a chance to change." Mark extended a hand across the gap, their fingers brushing in a simple offering of connection. In that small gesture, a significant pact formed, a commitment to face the shadows together instead of each alone. With clarity cutting through the weight of years, Mark wasn't just redefining his relationship with his father. He was forging a renewed narrative for himself and, more importantly, for Jacob. The resolution solidified within him. He could embrace vulnerability instead of shying away. Within the colorful tapestry of shared laughter behind him, Mark saw the outline of a future reimagined, where cycles of negativity could break under the persistence of love. He felt a profound sense of accomplishment rising within him, affirming his path toward reclaiming his role as a father, not encumbered by the past, but empowered by it. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the assembled family, Mark welcomed every feeling pride, relief, hope all tightly woven into the fabric of his heart. It was confirmation that true transformation was within reach. Now it was time to collect the moments of joy, not just at a distance but shoulder to shoulder, fortified by the acceptance of their flaws. Mark stood, heart swelling with every ounce of newfound confidence. "Let us go back," he said with a resolved smile, ready at last to embrace not just Jacob but the legacy he was choosing to build moving forward. Now it's your turn to join the journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters immensely. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this transformation. We want to hear from you. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.